Welcome, folks, to a Medcan Presents webinar. It is May 18th, Tuesday at 12:30 p.m., and that means it's time for our latest Medcan Presents webinar, which is how to be around people again. Dr. Jack Muskat is a psychologist, executive coach, speaker, author, and the clinical director of mental health here at Medcan. Jack, how are you today?
Okay, great, Chris. It's good to be out. I'm actually at the office. It's a beautiful day, and I'm looking forward to our session.
Amazing. So this is about, I don't know, it's a beautiful day in Toronto, which is where we both are. And it's people are out. People are out in the parks. They're getting outside. That's good for their mental health, but it's also provoking some heebie-jeebies, for lack of a better word. It's provoking some anxiety around being around people again. And is this okay? And is it, we're still in Ontario, we're still in a stay-at-home order, but people are talking about June 2nd, or it might be, after that, but 60% of people in Toronto are have at least their first dose. The end is approaching, we hope, and there is going to be a point where we are going to have to be around people again. And so this webinar is talking about your advice for the social anxiety, how to deal with the social anxiety that provokes. So first of all, are you hearing much about this? Are you hearing, I know you have we're going to have a presentation to go through, but just, is this coming up when you're talking to your patients, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite ironic. It's just been about a year and a half now. We've gone from where we didn't know what COVID was, and we were all getting together. We were meeting, we were flying into the country, we were doing all kinds of things. We all remember when that stopped. And now, ironically, most of us who've complied with the rules and have followed the lockdown procedures and are slowly getting back to things, many people have developed a social anxiety. So they didn't catch COVID, but they've caught social anxiety about, how do I get back? I don't want to get back. I'm feeling comfortable working from home. I don't really want to go back to the office. I actually don't want to see people. I find that uncomfortable. I find it really puts too many expectations on me. And we'll talk a little bit more, particularly the younger generation that didn't have the opportunity to even graduate high school or go into their first year of college, which is a normal developmental transition point. We've all had to do things at home, and some of us have over adapted and are now finding it hard to get out of the cave.
You have spoken a bit about, you do a ton of these webinars. You do webinars for corporate clients. Companies will hire Medcan and ask you to do a webinar about mental health and how to promote mental well. And you have talked a little bit about how if there is a fourth wave, that it's more likely that the fourth wave is going to be mental health. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll shift into your presentation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as I said earlier about Gen Z or Gen Z or the iGen, the young people that are both teens between 13 and 17 and young people between 20 and 24, for them, this has been an extraordinary experience around the anxiety that it's created. And I think that what we're going to see is also with the changing rules around education, the online learning, the back to school, the not in school, the learning from home, the disruption, the concerns about getting into college, how I'm going to learn, what I'm going to do online, parents worried, kids worried, inability to play sports, to do the normal socializing. When you think of what teenagers are primarily doing, is they're socializing with their small groups, unable to do any of that stuff. And then parents now having to go back to work on top of it, while they've been actually maybe creating a nice home environment for everyone, where it's been a kind of not safe cocoon, but a very safe place. I think that's going to create a lot of anxiety. Some of it's normal, which I want to talk about. Some of it is just the way we're wired. And some of it is just going to be a little tougher for people who are already struggling in general with issues around change, anxiety, and mood. So for sure, I think that's going to be a big concern we're all going to have.
we're going to shift into your presentation. Before we do, I want to, just to tell people, I'm sure everybody knows, but the way that you ask questions, please do ask questions. You can ask questions throughout and we'll get to them at the end. Ask questions with either the Q&A function or the chat function. Either one will work, and then I'll work with Dr. Muskat at the end, and we can work through those. I do just want to normalize this because there is this out there that social anxiety. It's weird. We've spent more than a year told by public health authorities, as we should have been, to stay home and not socialize. And now something is coming, and socializing will be happening again. And so this is perfectly timed. So, okay, I'm gonna share my screen again here, and we're gonna get into the presentation. There's Jack. I love that photo of you, Jack.
Thanks.
All right, okay, here we go. And I'm gonna be quiet.
Okay, so I wanted to start with this, everyone, because we've really forgotten, and those of you that have been watching Netflix nightly, which I'm sure most of us have, are probably surprised when we see people meeting in restaurants or going into swimming pools or actually golfing, except for Ontario. But this is what life used to be like. And in a way, we were totally conditioned to that. And this is what life has become over the last year. And it's not that we're so much socially isolated, it's that we have lost contact and connectiveness with people. And we've had to look into ourselves. And in a kind of ironic way, the more resilient we are with ourselves and the more we've had to depend on ourselves, we've forgotten how important it is to have other people in our life. And in many ways, those people are now seen because of the way in which we're not clear on what is going to happen health-wise. Is it safe to be around them? Are they masking? Are they not? Are they vaccinated or not? So what has occurred, as I said earlier, is that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of doubt and a lot of fear. And I wouldn't be surprising anyone by saying that globally, the world leadership and health officials, whether it's from WHO or the CDC or the Canada Health Agency, have given us contradictory and confusing messages many, many times. Sometimes it's because the data isn't there or it's changing. And sometimes we've seen how messaging has been politicized. And so it has created a lot of unease and a lot of concern about whom can you trust and what information is accurate. So I think that, and I think Chris said it well too, we've sort of, I want to normalize this discussion a bit, because in a way, our society has pathologized everything. And so everything becomes a mental illness or a mental health issue, when I'm going to suggest at some level, we've just gotten too comfortable. Is it social anxiety, or you just can't be bothered? And by that, as our world has shrunk, we have shrunk with it. When you have very few outlets, very few places to go, your day becomes revolves around, where do I get my groceries? Where should I get my milk? Where can I get takeout? Or for those of us who are ordering in, we've essentially forgotten that there's more to the world than just waiting to see if the mail arrives. And so I think that what has happened is that we have forgotten that we can connect with people, and in fact, people are sometimes become an area of concern for us. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay. This is an old slide. I love this slide. It's called "I Love Mankind, It's People I Can't Stand." And I hope you enjoy the humor here, that on an abstract level, we're told a lot of things that we ought to be doing, and that it's great to see people, and we're really all in this together, and that people really need to work together, and that in reality, what we're seeing is we're really concerned about ourselves. And are we being treated properly? Are we able to get vaccines? Are we able to sign up properly? Who's getting ahead of whom? What am I missing? What are the things that really matter to me, and that's usually yourself and your immediate family or your friends or your loved ones. So it's very, very hard to take a stance that says, I'm going to be doing something for a larger goal. And while it's important to say that we really care about people, in reality, we may find that it's a lot harder to reach out to those people that we used to reach out to them. And there's a reason for that if we go to the next slide. Okay. You know, I think what has happened, and just very briefly, I'm going to call this our homeostatic social thermostat, that people were incredibly adaptable. And like a thermostat, once your room in your house reaches a comfortable temperature, the thermostat sends an electrical signal to the furnace to turn off, thus maintaining homeostasis. And homeostasis in social groups will work the same way. We want to keep things at a comfortable social level through, you know, additional feedback that we have through our culture, social norms, facial expressions. We want to keep things familiar, even though we want change. And so if you recall back when there was the toilet paper shortage, um, many people were very anxious about going to the stores. And if you recall back to last March and April, when you'd go to the supermarket and the shelves were empty, there was a lot of anxiety that was created. So I just wouldn't go. I figured out a way that, you know, there's an app available that tells you based on the number of people in your house, how much toilet paper and how much toilet paper you have, how many days you can live without having to get more. And it turned out to be 36 days, which was enough time. We also found that we're able to live, as I'm sure you all did as well, when you started getting your visa bills and your other bills, and you saw how much money we're all saving because we haven't been able to go out. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that what has happened is first we started missing it. And then we felt, oh, I don't need to go to that restaurant, or it's too much work, or I don't need to go to that concert or at that sporting event. I'm used to just streaming. I'm used to things being at home. How will I go out again? What is it going to be like for me? And many of us have just cocooned and found a way to live without the things that we used to have. And a positive part of that was that we're able to get rid of some things that weren't important to us, associations that we had that weren't as important to us. And if you want to go to the next slide, when things get too comfortable, a set of inertia sets in. And it is like sitting in a warm bath with your clothes on. And why I say that is that by the time you're aware that you're sitting in a warm bath, you don't even care that you're wearing your clothes. Adam Grant just recently talked about languishing, and some of you may have read about this, as the state that many of us are in, that we're disconnected. We want to be hopeful, but we don't want to be too hopeful because we've been disappointed so often about when things are going to open up again, that we're kind of hedging our bets by saying, well, we really, you know, don't care that much, or we're going to just focus on the things we're currently doing, which I'll get to on the next slide. You know, many of us have found new interests, as I said earlier, and lost our old ones. I've stopped certain associations that I had, certain events that I would go to. I'm not as interested in those things anymore, but I've developed new ones. We have an online book club, an online movie club that we're part of. Because we've had to substitute social activities for other things, I've started doing crossword puzzles, which I don't really care very much about, but I've gotten not so bad at them. And I found that other things that I used to do, I've just stopped doing. So it's very difficult to regain those habits. As you know, it takes 6 weeks to learn a habit and 1 week to lose it. And one of those habits that many of us are struggling with that we've lost, and I regret for all of us who put on, last year it was the COVID-8, and this year, unfortunately, it's the COVID-15, is that we are unable to go to the gym, and we're unable to have that kind of connection to our bodies. And there's only so much walking that we can do. And so what we've done is we're sort of in a decision gridlock where we've forgotten what we used to do. We've forgotten that, oh, I used to ride that bike. In fact, I did go on a bike ride the other day, and I mentioned to a friend who I used to ride with, I said, would you like to go for a bike ride? And he said, and we're both vaccinated, he said that he's still got his bike on the training wheels, or the indoor. He's got it set up indoor, and he doesn't want to take it out right now, even though the weather's beautiful, because he just can't be bothered. So I think that to me really tells us that many of us are just sitting in a kind of stupor where we're really not sure of what we want to do and how we want to get to do the next thing, because we don't want to be disappointed again. And that's a pretty good defensive strategy. So let's go to the next slide. We used to be very social beings, and for some, we've been able to hide behind the pandemic and removed ourselves from our social obligations. When the pandemic first started, I was doing webinars around, the top 10 tips how to deal with COVID, and I got two kinds of questions. I got questions from couples who were driving each other crazy and saying, "How do I get rid of my partner?" And I also got the same questions from people that were living singly, alone, and saying, "I'm lonely. I wish I had someone to talk to." So we've tried to figure out a way where those of you who were with someone you wanted to get rid of could go over to that single person's house, and maybe you would you would be rid of what was bothering you, and they would gain a new friend. The message being, be careful what you wish for. That we have to have the flexibility and the adaptability to be both with people and not be with them, and not be too introverted. And what has happened is, I call these the 3 A's that we have gotten into our shells, with apathy, where we don't care anymore, with avoidance, which is basically, leave me alone, I'm doing my own thing, and with the last one, technically anhedonia, loss of pleasure. And this has been a real problem, where people don't even want to enjoy things anymore because they don't feel very enjoyable to do. And is that depression? Perhaps, but I think it's a normal reaction to the way in which we've had to cope. I think that defensively, the body is giving us messages that's saying, yes, we are eating too much comfort food, and maybe we are self-medicating too much with alcohol and cannabis. Interestingly enough, the 2 stores that were open throughout this period, and we're sort of numbing ourselves into not feeling the pain, which has the effect of making us even more anxious, because we're less likely to want to do things. So let's see how we can get out of this. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you, Chris. So, how are we going to get our edge back? We really, really need to regain our perspective. We need to remember, was that really me on the slopes? Was that really me doing the things I did last year? And think back to all the things that all of you were doing before the pandemic, and that you're not doing now, but that you just feel too weary to get back to. How are you going to get back to those things? What are the things that you're going to be doing to get your edge back? And I think one of the problems about social anxiety that I want to move forward on is that, we'll go to the next slide when you have a moment, Chris, is really looking at what is behind our apathy. And there's an expression I use with my patients. It's an saying the Japanese have: if you ask the question why 7 times, you'll often get to the truth. So why don't I want to go to the office? Why don't I want to see people? Why don't I want to get on my bike or do things? Why don't I want to do whatever? And it's often a fear of being judged and not feeling we're good enough. For those of us that are working part-time at home, part-time at the office, or are doing a hybrid situation, it's very different now going to the office during the pandemic, because in a way we've been given the freedom to catch up socially. And I think it's very healthy emotionally for us to spend our time at the office, if we are at the office, not so much working, but building those relationships with one another, so that we have the kind of reinforcement and inoculation against the loneliness. So you go to the office a couple days a week, perhaps, and you fill up with social strength, and then you go back home and work. Microsoft just released a study from Teams that shows that one of the effects of the pandemic has been that general teamwork has declined, and that people have basically stayed in their smaller teams. So where you might have cross-functional interactions before, between IT, finance, operations, and other departments, people are pretty much sticking to the knitting and sticking to their own groups, which isn't good for the business. And so, we're in a way concerned, are we going to be good enough to go back to work? Are we going to be able to perform? And we've developed very unrealistic expectations of ourselves and others. I did another webinar last week where what I was asked was, so how do we feel better about this? And I said, well, what we need to do is recognize that everyone is feeling the same thing you're feeling. It's like when you go to a four-way stop, the person that you're looking at is looking at you because you're both trying to figure out who goes through the stop sign, but you both have the same goals. So in some respects, we have to get to a point where we can feel that we want to do the work in order to get the reward. That when you feel uncomfortable, and I must tell you, I felt uncomfortable getting on my bike, but I did pump the air in the tires. And once I got out there after 15 minutes, and this is why exercise is so important, why once you get your body moving, it can change your mood. And once you do that, it changes your thinking. And so what I'm really saying is that we have to get back to nature. We have to get back to our own human interaction, what I call our analog selves, because we've been too hunkered over the device, and the devices has given us an artificial level of success and failure. It's very easy to do things on our devices. So let's move to the next slide. And our lack of motivation, as I was saying, isn't the result, is the result actually. It's not the cause of why we can't get things done. It's because we're unable to, as I said earlier, Adam Grant calling this languishing. Our emotional brain has taken over our intentions, and we can't think our way through this. It's not something rational. And I note that we rely on cognitive distortions to make us feel better. And cognitive distortions are typically what we would call, all or nothing thinking, catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking, denial, rationalization. I don't want to do this, or I do want to do this. I'm not really interested. Things are really going to be terrible. I've forgotten the password to my computer. I don't know how to use Excel anymore. What's going to happen? And everyone is going through that. So let's see what normal is. Let's go to the next slide. And how do we regain normal? We're basically been told by the authorities, and it's kind of interesting because I think Canadians or North Americans in general, people are very cooperative and can figure things out on their own and are generally working well together. As soon as we get government restrictions and we feel the oppressive rules that are out there, we stop caring because we feel that we're arbitrarily being ticketed for doing a workout in a park by oneself, or that there's we're stopped. There's a radar or a red light camera or a municipal camera where you're not even speeding, or you're told you can't go here, you can't go there. You give up your agency, you give up your sense of ability to be an adult, and you say, all right, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask, stay out of trouble. And we've readjusted, and we are just waiting for the next order. I think it was John Oakley who called Canada sleep country. And that's in a way, a very good thing that we're a very civil, decent people, but it's made us unable to move forward in a way that we need to get out of it. So what are we going to do? What is normal? Let's see what we can do to do better. We need to give up fear for fun. And what do I mean by that? All the news is bad news all the time, but it's not all bad for you. And I think that what I think we're over focused on, and the media do nothing but report things like the variants. So for example, there are more variants, but by nature, the viruses are mutating, but people aren't getting any sicker. There may be more transmission. People that are vaccinated have not gotten ill from COVID, although a very, very tiny number have tested positive. And it's forced us to try to become our own um, doctors and our own epidemiologists to try to figure out statistically what's going to happen. But if we did that when we were driving on the 401, we would never drive on the 401 because there are accidents every day. But we still take that risk because we live in a society that is not 100% risk-free. So we have to put the fun back into what we're doing. The other idea of fun is that we need to gain perspective and say, I have survived this. And for many of you, you may have lost loved ones. I'm sorry if that's the case, and my condolences, or you've been separated from loved ones or elderly people that are ill, or you've seen your kids suffer, and it isn't been fun. But there is a way to find some fun, and make a plan to get out there and be social. I think we're actually seeing it. I don't need to give you advice. If what Chris is saying is true about the parks, then we're already doing it. So I think and the last thing I was going to say is simply that find a buddy. It's very hard to do this on your own, but if you make a commitment to meet a friend or a buddy to hold yourself accountable, you'll be able to get started. So that's sort of a lot of things that we covered, but I hope that we got to most of them.
That was great. Thank you so much. It was really interesting. Just how prevalent and how normal this is, and then the wide range of responses I think that are out there. That one thing I was thinking as you were going through your presentation was the notion that you get your driver's license. We have a graduated driver's license. You talked about the 401 and driving on the 401. You don't start out driving on the 401. You start, going around the block or driving in a Walmart parking lot. And then,
right.
And then you drive around the block, and then you drive in your neighborhood, and then maybe you go downtown, and then there's the 401. And I wonder whether we can apply a similar metaphor to socialization, and the equivalent of the 401 might be like the office in full mode, the way it used to be, so it's, coming downtown and going through the path system when it's crowded, and then going to your office and in an elevator, that is like the 401. But there are things that we can do to prep for that, such as using a buddy, like you suggested, to maybe go for a walk. You don't go from the stay-at-home order to going to your
Right.
office full board. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you want to scaffold it a bit. I mean, one of the things that employers are already doing, and we're doing it here at Medcan, is that people can choose to come in or not come in depending on how they're working. There are certain departments, I mean, interestingly enough, that aren't going to be meeting at the office because they don't need to be at the office, and they've agreed to that, but they'll meet once a month for the social need for that. But there is, to answer it, it's really around adaptability. No one has to drive on the 401. There are people that won't drive on the 401. They'll take side streets. On the other hand, if you have to use the 401 because you need to get somewhere, wouldn't you rather be adaptable to know that you can drive on the 401? So you need to have practice. So you're right. You would start on the side streets, then you would get onto the 401 maybe on a Sunday morning when it's quieter, and you would learn to do that. I think that what you're talking about, Chris, is really that we need to develop confidence and practice effect and be able to say, I'm going to go into the office. Everyone's in the same boat now. Everyone is feeling the same thing. The leaders, your employers, your bosses are as concerned about your well-being as you're concerned about what demands are going to be placed on me. What can I do? And we're going to forget, we're not going to have an empty downtown. For those of you, and I wish you well, who've moved to the suburbs or to small towns or to Collingwood or to Peterborough, great for those towns. I hope those economies improve, and great for those people who've done well. But there's a reason why downtown Toronto is so compelling. There's a reason why 3.5 million people live here and why 100,000 people move into the city every year. And we're going to forget that we didn't want that. And we're going to look at the entertainment district, and maybe TIFF this year isn't going to be as great as it was 2 years ago, but everyone's going to want to be downtown again. Everybody's going be together because we're a social species. Monkeys
No,
see,
listen,
monkey
wait,
do.
TIFF is September. Come on, let's hope TIFF is, TIFF, a Medcan
Yeah,
client,
yeah,
which we're helping. I think
right.
our medical advisory services team, which you're a part of,
Right.
Jack, is helping TIFF stage a safe festival, and we're I think it's going to be a great event, and hopefully a real live event, because that'll happen in.
I do too. I'm just hoping that Doug Ford's buddies don't have to get together for pops afterwards because, can we trust people to actually social distance? And we can. And of course, it's going to be a wonderful event in September, but we're going to rebuild. So I think what you're saying is that I think the weather, it couldn't be better timing. It is, people are already feeling better. We're naturally going to want to socialize. One quick anecdote, during the 10-day period where the patios were open, I walked by our local pub and they had the patio open at noon on a Saturday. They just opened. Nobody knew they were opening. About 4 people showed up. We all sat down. We texted our friends. Within an hour, the place was full and they were telling others. And by all afternoon, because we wanted the local business to get the business, but also it was like a rave or whatever we call those things where people just know to get together. And I think people can self-regulate and self-manage. It's a hive mentality, but I think people are really, there's a kind of intelligence, the intelligence or the wisdom of crowds. We're not all going off a cliff together, but I think we're, in some ways we should be trusted to be able to make sensible decisions. So I'm mindful of our time, but
yeah, let me. So
yeah,
we do have some questions, and let me.
sure.
One question is actually from a friend of mine who I haven't seen, for ages, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing when the pandemic's over. So that's good. So this is the question. So how can we not shake hands in a business context or refrain from hugging closer friends without being awkward once things open up and people are no longer distant? So are there signals that you can give out? And I will try to remember this when I see you, my friend. So, but in any event, what do you do in that situation if you are, freaked out with that sort of contact?
Well, I mean, in general, if we think back, there are a lot of people who can't shake hands for lots of reasons. They have an injury. So, if they're resistant or you just touch elbows or you kind of do an air high five, if the reason you don't want to shake hands, and there are going to be people that are going to wear masks, they say up to 20% of the population is going to keep wearing masks in public venues because the fear factor is there. I mean, we forget. I didn't catch a cold. I've actually ironically been my healthiest during the pandemic because I haven't seen anybody. I've been washing my hands all the time. So I'm going to do that more. But I'm also going to shake hands because I think it's important. If you're vaccinated, you already have immunities and you need to have a little bit of exposure to things, but not shaking hands with people that are sick or have colds. We forget how we get sick of other things. And to your friend's question, I think it's simply asking, if someone's comfortable shaking hands or not shaking hands. I think it really comes down to the basic etiquette that we've always tried to use. I don't think it's going to. I think it's going to be, again, not everyone's going to shake hands. They're the early adopters of anything, right? The beta testers, they'll shake hands. They're not going to have their arms fall off. And then everyone's going to shake hands and a hug. And I think it'll happen in a spontaneous way, but in a healthy way. I think people are going to be responsible and saying, look, I don't feel comfortable. But I think now we ask people if they want to be hugged, and we're very aware of social comfort around that, not just social distancing.
One last question, and then we'll get to the wrap up. But
sure.
So a lot of Medcan clients, I think a lot of people on this call are probably managers or are managing teams of some sort, whether it's a work site that has 500 people in it or a team that is like 5 to 10 investment bankers or something. In those cases, are there things that the manager, that the executive can do to make things easier for the team coming in to mitigate this social anxiety that people are feeling?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things that we don't talk about, we talk about mental health, but we don't talk about mental functioning. And the impact of the pandemic on our cognition has been huge. Lack of exercise, eating junk food, being cooped up, all of us have experienced this. I don't know what day it is. If I didn't come into work today, I wouldn't know what day it was. We don't know what day it is. We have a long weekend, a holiday weekend. Really? How's Victoria Day going to be different? Every day is Groundhog Day. And I think that's going to take time for people to get back into the swing of things. And so I've told employers on my calls to our clients, you have to budget twice the time and half the demands on people. And I think that is what is going to help. And to realize that not everybody is going to react the same way, and other people have more capacity. And so we shouldn't expect everyone on the team to say, well, 4 out of 5 of us are okay. Why aren't you okay? But to understand that one size does not fit all. We don't need 27 solutions, but we need maybe 4 or 5 different flavors, and give people a chance to really realize that we've created a psychological safe space. One more word on this. I think I've experienced that a huge lack of faith in the leadership at all levels during this pandemic. I think we've learned a lot. What can we expect from our leaders and our business leaders as well? And if you can provide that trust, if we can rebuild the trust with our employees that what we're asking them to do is legitimate and fair, and that those of whom are doing those things, getting vaccinated, can we reward them so that others will get vaccinated? Can we recognize them? Can we create spaces where now if they have to have flexibility around schooling for their kids, they can do that without looking like they're taking time away from the job? So I think there's been some good things that have come out of this, ironically.
I do take your point that people are feeling better. And I hope you're feeling this in your practice as well, that, people are coming in. It is easy to feel better when the weather is 23 and sunny and there are opportunities. This is, and the news is, there is a lot of good news out there. So that's good. So to wrap up so give up fear for fun. Dr. Muskat, you said that. Make a plan to get out there and be social, and then create a buddy system to hold yourself accountable. So this is maybe I think what you're meaning there is make a date with somebody to go for a walk, say in Hyde Park, or go for a walk down by the lakeshore, or wherever you happen to be. But do something to get you over the hump of this social anxiety that I think we're all feeling.
Right. To get started and to give yourselves a pat on the back and to be grateful. We've gotten through this. It's a slow build. It starts one day at a time, one step at a time. We all know this, but we just have to do it. And once we do it and have that support, I think we'll feel better. And 2 years from now, we'll look back and we'll be able to say, this is a great story that I can tell my grandchildren someday.
2 years from now, it seems unimaginable to even think about that. But okay, so what is the next Medcan Presents Future webinar? So June 1st, we're doing cottage cooking made easy. Do you love spending time at the cottage but dread the time it takes to cook for a crowd? Registered dietitian Sarah Jafari will show you how to make a meal to remember on your barbecue so you can maximize the time you spend with friends, family, and outside in the sun. So where to go for that? Go to the medcan.com listen, watch, and learn page. That's you go to the medcan.com site, and then on the right, you see podcasts and webinars, and click on that, and you can register through there. Dr. Jack Muskat is the guest host of the latest podcast, which is an interview with How to Do the Work with Dr. Nicole LaPera. I think you had some fun in that one, Dr. Muskat, and we had fun putting that together. So that's great too. Folks, thank you so much. This is normal. It is, it is a natural kind of thing to feel as we all move through this transition. But if you are feeling like you need professional help, then, call, Dr. Muskat is available. You can just call 416-350-5900. That's the Medcan general number, and arrange an appointment. Dr. Muskat, any final words?
Thank you. Yes, we're doing virtual appointments. Eventually, we'll get back to real ones. It'll be great to see people, but I wish everyone a great day and a better tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Nice talking to you.
Dr. Jack Muskat. Thanks to the webinar attendees for the great questions, and have a great week, folks.